Welcome to 2026. I'm Paul Comfort, and this is Transit Unplugged, America's leading public transportation podcast. Today, we're in the middle of a six-part series on the state of transit in America. We closed out 2025 with a couple of views of hot topics for transit agencies and the industry. And now we start off this year with a look from Washington, D.C. Our guest is Bennett Resnik. Bennett is Senior Vice President in the Critical Infrastructure Group at Venn Strategies, advising manufacturing companies in the transportation and energy sectors on federal funding and tax incentives, advocacy strategy. Bennett has worked on the Hill for a number of years and is one of the most connected guys in the public transportation world. He received his bachelor's degree from James Madison University and his JD from Vermont Law School. He's an active member of the District of Columbia Bar and a registered lobbyist there. And he takes us inside some of the hot topics coming out of Washington. The biggest one, of course, is the reauthorization of our Mass Transportation Act. He'll talk about that, what the status of it is. We talk about where we're at on zero emissions, the history of that, what's happening now in the new Trump administration, where we at on Buy America and those rules, and finally a look at the federal budget and what that portends, that process. As you know, we're coming up to another deadline from the fiscal year budget that began, quote unquote, fiscal year began October 1st, and we still don't have an appropriation bill for that passed by Congress. It's just a continuing resolution. So we talk about all that, kind of a view from Washington, D.C. Next week, we'll take a view from out in the field, so to speak, with Julie Brown. She's president of the Community Transportation Association of America, as we continue on Transit Unplugged to bring you inside and behind the scenes of what's happening in public transportation, not only in North America, but also around the world. We've got some exciting guests coming up in the next few months. We'll tell you more about them as we get closer. But for today, enjoy this great wide view of what's happening from the Hill and from Washington, D.C. with Bennett Resnik. Welcome to 2026. This is going to be a great year for public transportation. I'm excited to have with us Bennett Resnik. Bennett, as I mentioned in the opening, is very active in Washington, D.C. And so he's going to give us a view from the Capitol. Today we're going to talk about, Bennett, thanks for being with us.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Today, Bennett and I are going to talk about reauthorization. What is it? Let's dive into it. We'll talk about the status of zero emissions. What's going on with that? There's been a huge shift in the thinking coming out of Washington on zero emission buses. We're also going to talk about Buy America. There's been some changes and some adjustments. What's that look like now for transit agencies in America? And then if we have time, and hopefully we'll dive a little bit into the federal budget. Since we're in January, as you know, there was a short extension, and we'll talk to Bennett about what he's hearing from the top. First off, Bennett, tell us a little about what you do.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a senior vice president in our critical infrastructure practice at Venn Strategies. That's mostly in the transportation and energy policy areas. In the transportation world, my work is largely in public transit, do some work with freight rail as well, dealing with legislation, federal regulations, serving as a liaison with a lot of the industry supporting organizations, guiding clients through what is the maze of a federal bureaucracy here in DC.
So are you what we would commonly know as a lobbyist?
Yeah, so we are lobbyists. We're all registered lobbyists, but we do more comprehensive government affairs consulting, dealing with legislation, regulations, and also guiding clients through what might be business activities that interact with the government, federal contracts, things like that.
And Bennett and I, for the listeners, have known each other for many years. I consider him one of the most connected guys on the Hill. He's often given me insights into what's happening, and I've been able to pass them on to your listeners. So now we go right to the source. So Bennett, I love the presentation you recently did. You had a webinar on reauthorization. Right. And I thought we should start with that because that's really the hot ticket item for public transit coming into 2026, right?
That's right. That's exactly it. Yep.
Talk to us about what reauthorization is, what it means, and where we're at on it.
Yeah, so the Surface Transportation Bill, reauthorization directs federal funding. It establishes programs and reforms policies for highways, public transportation, increasingly rail. The current law that we're operating under is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA. It authorized programs and funding levels through September of 2026, which is why we're talking about it today. Congress is actively discussing those priorities and drafting that language. IIJA was a huge, $1.2 trillion package, about $550 billion in new federal spending. That was laid on top of the baseline service programs, which runs from 22 to FY 2026. The other thing that was really fascinating with how the bill was put together is there was a large amount of advance appropriations from the general fund, about 47 billion for highways, 21 billion for transit, to fund a lot of the new and expanded programs that were put together. The benefit is that it locks in those funds, so it's not a year-over-year fight with annual appropriations. But these were big numbers. I mean, IIJA increased funding for maybe 90% for highways, 80% for transit. Amtrak saw a lot of increase, 750% for passenger intercity rail. Um, I don't think we're going to get those big numbers this upcoming reauthorization. It's going to be a little bit more focused on consolidating programs, streamlining regulations, finding ways to create efficiencies in these programs that were developed over the last several years.
And this all go back to the 1964 Urban Mass Transportation Act. That was the first one, and then every 5 years or so, we have to have it reauthorized. The government's involvement, the federal government's.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, what's interesting when you look at like T21 and Safety Lou and MAP 21, some of them are done in a midterm election year. This is what we're going to be dealing with the next reauthorization. And so, as you look at historically where the reauthorizations occurred in line with midterm elections, you all see a lot of extensions because of that. And so, yes, we're all hoping and working towards getting a reauthorization done in 2026 before it expires, but it's possible because it's going to butt up against midterms that we could see a number of extensions. MAP 21 was enacted in July of 2012. 4 months before the 2012 presidential election. It expired before the 2014 midterms, and then we had extensions until late 2015. So it's possible that we have a similar scenario with IIJA expiring 34-ish days, I think, before the 26 midterms. So will we see it pass? Will we see several extensions? That's what's up for debate.
Interesting. Let's talk about what's the process right now. So I know that I went up to Capitol Hill months ago with some colleagues from the North American Transit Alliance. There was the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee, Sam Graves Committee, was holding kind of like listening sessions. And so some folks from our group spoke on that. What's been going on and where are we at now?
Yeah, so just for everyone's awareness, the Senate side and the House side have different processes. So the House side, most of the work happens in the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee. There's some work that's covered in the Science Committee and the Ways and Means Committee. The Senate side's a little different. You've got Environment and Public Works that covers highways, Commerce that covers rail, and the Senate Banking Committee that covers transit. So all of them have had activities. As you're talking about, you've got the T&I Committee that had a number of hearings since the beginning of 25, called it their America Builds series. So on rail, on transit, on roads and safety, on trucking and financing, it was all over the place because the reauthorization is such a comprehensive piece of legislation. So there have been member days, listening sessions, there have been hearings, and there's been opportunities for associations, individuals, coalitions to write into the committee. T&I in particular had some stakeholder submissions back in April, and then members who are on committee also submit their priorities. So there's been a lot of activity, both from the hearing side and also stakeholder submissions on what their priorities are. But I also don't want to leave out the administration. The DOT had a request for information back in July on surface transportation reauthorization priorities. They received thousands of submissions, and you have the DOT Transportation Advisory Board that's been making recommendations, doing a listening tour to get a sense of what everybody is focused on.
As people listen to this, the week of the 7th, January 7th of next week is going to be the Transportation Research Board, TRB, big conference in D.C. I'm headed down there for that, and I'm actually scheduled for a meeting with the administration, with the FTA folks and the administrator that week, and I'm sure we'll hear from him what their thoughts are on reauthorization. So I know that the House had a stated goal of trying to get this bill on the floor by the end of the year, but then there was the government shutdown, and Congress, the House didn't meet for a while, maybe a month or more, and so everything is stalled. So take us what's going to happen now as you see it going forward.
Yeah, the timing's a little bit uncertain. What we do know is that they want to get bill text out in the first quarter of the year, maybe get something to the floor March, April, perhaps May before the summer recess in the House, and try to get something passed by the end of September before the deadline.
And then is the Senate working concurrently? So do they have to have a conference committee if they come up with different things before it goes to the president?
That's one way it could go. Is on the Senate side, Senate EPW typically takes the lead since the highway title is such a substantial portion of the bill. But the Senate's not working as quickly as the House is. House Chairman Graves is a bit more motivated, considering this is going to be his last time with the gavel on the committee. So he's hoping to get something out and passed this year.
I understand from some of my friends up on Capitol Hill that now there is competing interests. One side maybe wants to slow it down because they think they may take over the House, while the other side, like you said, is motivated to get it through in case political parties change control of the House. So we'll see what happens, Ben. Thanks for getting us up to date and up to speed. But there's lots of policy in that. And one of the policy items that has been up in the air over the last 9 months has really been the zero emissions. So this whole push of the Biden administration to create funding for battery electric buses. And there was, people who listen to this podcast know we've covered this a lot, is the fact that the number of bus manufacturers in the United States, we used to have 5 big ones. And then within a couple of years, people know what happened with Proterra and others. Nova left America. Plattsburgh went back to Montreal. I just visited the Nova bus plant and took a tour of it when we were at CUDA conference. And that's on the air this month on our Montreal TV show. We actually toured the plant there. But there's been a lot of changes, and now we got bus manufacturers trying to come back in. This kind of ties into our next topic, Buy America. But let's zero in, Bennett, on zero emissions. Tell us about where we're at on that.
Yeah, so for context, so you had MAP 21, which consolidated a lot of the research, development, demonstration projects and the national research programs into one program. And under that, they placed this low-no emissions vehicle deployment program under that new office. There was about $70 million authorized a year for that program. FAST Act then reestablished a bus discretionary program with a portion of that, it was $55 million, specifically for low-no projects. So you had a standalone lower no emission vehicle program with dedicated funding. This is FY 2016. IIJA scaled that significantly from $55 million level to over $1 billion a year. Now that $55 million had gained substantially over the years of appropriations. I think we left it at maybe $180 million when IIJA was authorized. So a ton of money was being put into transitioning fleets, not just for battery electric, but there was also some interest in hydrogen fuel cell electric buses as well. I'm not certain of the exact number today, but maybe over 7,000 or so zero emission buses out there, battery electric being the vast majority of that market share. Fuel cells, maybe 500-600 of those 7,000 being fuel cell. We just had the FTA announce a couple of weeks ago awards for the low-no bus and bus facilities program. That was $2 billion in awards, 165 projects, 2,400 buses. So a lot of interest in transit agencies transitioning their fleets to either to zero emission or CNG, diesel electric.
Yeah, talk about CNG. Is that covered under the low-no grants?
Yeah, so low-no, there's some flexibility based on the administration on where that money can go. The Biden administration largely focused on funding battery electric buses. The awards that just came out a couple of weeks ago, you'll see mostly CNG applications. There was a de-emphasis on zero emission, and that's some politics at play, but also just the focus of this FTA. My understanding is a back to basics kind of mentality of safety, efficiency, reliability, frequency, and arguably zero emission may not fit in there, depending on which side of the aisle you're talking to. And so their belief is, can you have a safe, efficient, reliable bus that is diesel, electric, CNG, and the answer is yes. You could also have one that's zero emission.
Yeah, no surprise to our listeners here. We've covered that extensively. There's been a lot of interest in hydrogen. I'm very interested in hydrogen as a renewable energy source, and we've done a lot of coverage on that on the show. The other one, the big one, like you mentioned, CNG. There's a lot of places in America and in Canada where there's a lot of compressed natural gas available, and many transit agencies now feel like now's a good time to go in that direction. And some of them have stalled. I, talked to one recently that was supposed to build a big new battery electric bus facility, and they've stalled that because they weren't sure about the funding coming from the feds to help them with that. And so it is a time of introspection. And one announcement that we covered on our TV show, I talked to the president of Nova Bus, Paul, and he at the CUDA conference announced, hey, last year we announced we were going all battery electric buses for manufacturing. Now for the next year's model, we're going to go ahead and open it back up to diesel and hybrid vehicles as well. So you can see the supply side adjusting to the market as well.
I do just want to mention, so you talked about Proterra being back in the market with their acquisition by Phoenix Motorcar.
Right.
ENC, that was sold to Revaz, later announced a restart of their production after a temporary pause. And from the battery electric side, you've got Solaris. They sold a few buses, 4 to King County, I think 6 to San Francisco MTA, I think maybe a couple in New York MTA. So you are seeing a number of bus manufacturers coming back into the market with a particular emphasis, surprisingly, considering the politics of battery electric.
Yeah, a good buddy of mine has taken over down there running what used to be Proterra, but now with Phoenix and the South Carolina plant, they're back in the market, I understand. So tell us about where we're at on what is Buy America for those who don't know, who are uninformed maybe on it, and where are we at now on it?
Yeah, the Buy America Act that was introduced back in 1933 was adopted during the Great Depression because there was a need to create and preserve jobs for American workers. So with that goal in mind, Congress thought, okay, well, let's establish a preference for the federal government to buy domestic products rather than have that money flow to the purchase of foreign-made goods. So that was when the government purchased something. That's Buy American. Buy America is when the grantee, the transit agency, is making a purchase with federal funding. So we've seen a lot of movement on that. Even in Trump's first term, he had the Buy American, Hire American Act. That was a bit more aggressive enforcement and scrutiny of waivers across different agencies. He's had a huge focus on U.S. procurement priorities. Also, tariffs have influenced purchasing or onshoring products. But then you've had the Build America, Buy America Act that was included in IIJA, that was implemented across non-DOT agencies, so things that touch energy and water and broadband, disaster recovery, basically putting Buy America where Buy America was currently not. And so we have this kind of puzzle of Buy America. Some have Buy America, some have Buy American, some have Build America, Buy America, and there's some differences in guidance and implementation. So in this upcoming reauthorization, actually, we might see some harmonization of those differences just to give companies and individuals, other stakeholders, a better sense of what the requirements are.
But basically, you have to say that if you're going to buy a bus or a vehicle with federal dollars, a certain percentage has to be made in America, right?
That's right.
Yeah, it was like 70% or something like that.
That's right.
In round numbers, yeah.
That's right. From the highway side, as of October of 2026, in addition to the final assembly, you got the manufactured products that have to exceed 55% domestic content. So there are different percentages across the government and based on what you're buying, but on the bus side, yes, it's much higher.
I know that during the pandemic, there was a crunch on paratransit vehicles. And there was a Turkish company that was trying to get a waiver of Buy America during the last year of the Biden administration. I don't think they ever actually got it, but I think their plan is now to build a plant in America. I know I was just out recently in Salt Lake City, Utah, and visited a train company there, Stadler, who, is a European company, but they built a plant here 10 years ago, largely, because they wanted to get into the American market and they knew they couldn't because Buy America. So they had to move a plant here, and now they've done great. By the way, it's an amazing train factory. A lot of people love Stadler trains. I know I do. So it does make a difference, right? I mean, it's moving things around and moving them here to America.
That's right. And if you want to be able to take advantage of federal tax dollars, I think you should, be building in the U.S. and hiring American workers to be able to leverage those funds.
Anything else on Buy America before we head into the federal budget?
I just want to address one piece of this is most frequently cited is on the bus costs and Buy America. New York City bus purchase back in the 80s for roughly $155,000 is most recently cited. If you adjust that for inflation, producer prices, that bus would cost in the low mid 500,000 range today if it were built exactly as it was then. But today's buses are not the same product. You've got roughly $250,000 in additional ADA and safety and emissions, technology, durability, compared to the 1980s predecessors. So when a lot of individuals talk about Buy America, they sometimes talk about that being the reason why bus costs have gone up. But if you account for mandated and expected improvements, all the quality adjustments, you're still looking at a bus that's in line with contemporary diesel transit in terms of costs and what you would expect from those vehicles.
Okay, so we started out the show talking about reauthorization, and but that's not the budget. That kind of sets the parameters. But then each year, Congress has to pass an annual budget, which will fund the government, and it comes to the forefront when Congress and everybody passes it. Nobody thinks about it much here, out in the fruited plain, as they say, or the prairie. But when they don't, it gets everybody's attention, right? Because they shut the government down. So we had a government shutdown at the end of last year. And they passed finally a continuing resolution, kind of a kick the can down the road, some people call it. And it runs out when, Bennett, and what's happening with the budget?
So you've got the budget and you've got appropriation. The president's budget's due to Congress by the first Monday in February. Typically slips, a little bit past that. And that internal process starts much earlier. But that really kicks off the discussion of appropriations. Typically, we say President proposes and Congress disposes. This administration, this Congress, there's a lot more similarities between the president's budget and what Congress, Republican-controlled Congress, is proposing. But you're right. We've got a deadline to hit by I think it's January 30th. That we're looking at appropriations running out, and we possibly could be in another shutdown situation. While we think transit and transportation is always front and center, really what's driving this are the ACA subsidies. And some other politics at play here. But yes, there's a very real possibility that we see a short-term shutdown the end of January.
And so the president's budget that he submits by February, that's for the next fiscal year, right? Which begins
That's right.
Next October. So the two are going to blend together, huh?
That's right. We're going to be playing catch up here. Yeah.
I know that some states have gone to biannual budgets where they do a budget the last 2 years, probably so they don't get caught up in this thing.
That's right.
Every year it gets stretched out.
That's right.
Yeah. And then you've got the politics of the midterm elections coming up, which impact everything, right? In Washington, it's all about the election cycle every 2 years.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. There's a lot of different politics at play here with reauthorization and appropriations. Big focus on highways over transit, that traditional infrastructure as you typically hear about. A lot of focus on safety, security, and fare evasion. That's been really front and center in the press with DOT and the FDA. This focus on state and local match and what the makeup of these applications should look like. And the one thing that I haven't mentioned this whole time is the Olympics and the FIFA World Cup. I mean, these are
let's talk about that.
Major events that DOT is mobilizing everybody around to make sure that both U.S. citizens and those that are visiting can get to where they need to go.
For those who are listening, if you're a senior executive in a transit agency and you're interested in these topics, I encourage you to consider coming to my executive summit, which is going to be held as part of the Think Transit conference at the end of March. And it is being held this year in Boston. And we're going to do an all-day seminar just for top transit executives. And one of the panels will be about just what you said, which is, safety and security, fare evasion. We'll have another panel led by senior executives of other transit agencies on cybersecurity and AI and the role. Those are the two hot topics coming out of 2025. So we'll put a link in the description of this podcast if you want to find out more about that conference. It's an in-person event where 60 or 70 top leaders come together for just one day and talk to each other in a Chatham House Rules day, where we keep it to ourselves and we don't quote anyone when we come out, but we hear what's really going on. So thank you, Bennett. Any final closing thoughts you have about transit and public transportation as we head into this new year?
It's a critical investment and we need more of it. That's my summary.
There you go. I'm sure our listeners would agree. Bennett Resnik, Senior Vice President in the Critical Infrastructure Group at Venn Strategies. Thank you so much for giving us, as we head into this year, a look from Washington, D.C., what's happening in public transportation.
Happy to. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Transit Unplugged, the world's #1 transit executive podcast. I'm Julie Gates, executive producer of the podcast. Many thanks to the team that makes this show happen. Host and producer Paul Comfort, producer Chris O'Keefe, editor Patrick Emile, associate producer Cindy Raskin. Transit Unplugged is being brought to you by Modaxo, passionate about moving the world's people. If you would enjoy behind-the-scenes insights and updates from the show, sign up for our weekly newsletter, which has links to can't-miss conversations with the biggest names in mobility. Head to transitunplugged.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Transit Unplugged.